I'm Christine Weber, one of the members of the Portland Women in Art Lecture Series Committee at Portland Community College and art faculty at the PCC Sylvania campus. And I would like to welcome all of you to the Sylvania campus. Tonight, we are fortunate to have Dr. Leslie King-Hammond as our fourth speaker of the Portland Women in Art Lecture Series. The lecture series was founded in 2010 with the goal of presenting important women in the visual arts to the students and faculty of PCC and the greater Portland community. Our focus is on pioneering feminist artists and women significant in the fields of art and art history. In 2011, Carolee Schneemann did a performative lecture on this very stage titled Mysteries of the Iconographies, and this inaugurated our series. In 2012, Charlotte Kotick, curator emerita of the Brooklyn Museum, spoke on the work of sculptor Louise Bourgeois. And in 2013, renowned painter and printmaker Jean Quick-to-See Smith spoke both here at PCC and at the Portland Art Museum about her work and the work of other significant Native American artists. One goal of the lecture series is to encourage collaboration between the PCC community and other institutions locally, regionally, and nationally. Along with a public lecture, our speakers participate in one-on-one student critiques and professional development dinners for faculty. This year, Dr. King-Hammond will also be our guest at a luncheon honoring PCC student artists and leaders. Because this week-long series of events takes place on all 4 campuses, it would be impossible without district-wide collaboration and really a lot of hard work on the part of PCC faculty and faculty from Portland State University. This year, we have students on our committee, and their enthusiasm and creativity has greatly enhanced the collaborative spirit of this project. So I'd like to take just a few minutes to introduce the phenomenal members of the Portland Women in Art Lecture Series Committee. First, I'd like to introduce you to Marie Sivak, sculpture faculty at Sylvania, and the woman who originally spearheaded this effort and has worked tirelessly to keep this lecture series going. Let's give her a hand. Elizabeth Beaulieu, art history faculty and gallery director at the Cascade campus, and one of the co-chairs of our committee this year. Prudence Roberts, art history faculty and director of the Heltzer Gallery at the Rock Creek campus, and another chair. Rachel Siegel, photography faculty at the Sylvania and Southeast campuses. And Dr. Sue Taylor, art history professor and associate dean at Portland State University School of Art and Design. And our student committee members, Kelsey Birsa, who has been our social media guru. Yeah. And Darby Jones-Harrington, who is in the audience right now in charge of photographing all of our events this week. And finally, Sally Del Rosario, who unfortunately could not be here with us tonight, but will be photographing other events throughout the week, and has also been working with Darby to create a visual record of our events. We'll clap. I should also say that all 3 students have provided valuable feedback and a lot of suggestions throughout our planning process, so thank you for your hard work. I would also like to acknowledge our funders this year. Without their support, these events would be impossible to organize. Dr. Suzanne Johnson, interim Sylvania campus president, has been a significant supporter of the series this year. Hello? Building on the generosity of Dr. Linda Gerber, former Sylvania president, who was instrumental in keeping the series going after its inception in 2010. Dr. Karen Edwards, Cascade Campus President, Dr. Sandra Fowler-Hill, Rock Creek Campus President, Dr. Jessica Howard, Southeast Campus President, and Dr. Cheryl Scott, Dean of Instruction at Rock Creek, have also provided major funding for the events this week. Let's give them all. What's really phenomenal is that all 4 campus presidents have generously participated in our events this year, despite their very busy schedules, so thank you. Additionally, I'd like to express thanks to the School of Art and Design at Portland State University, the PCC Rock Creek Women's Resource Center, the Sylvania Women's Resource Center, and the Multicultural Centers, the Performing Arts Center team here, and the PCC Video Production Unit and Media Services for recording tonight's lecture, which will be made available on YouTube after the event. It is now my great pleasure to introduce the Sylvania Campus President, Dr. Suzanne Johnson, who will be introducing our honored speaker to you. Suzanne Johnson is a developmental psychologist and published author with 27 years of experience in higher education, both as an administrator and an educator. Her seminal books on gay and lesbian parenting, published in several languages, have influenced classroom teaching, professionals working with gay parents, and the growing multitudes of gay and lesbian parents worldwide. Dr. Johnson is also an accomplished martial artist, holding multiple black belts, including one in Hakoryu Jiu-Jitsu, where practitioners seek to prevent acts of violence before they occur. Please join me in welcoming this multi-talented leader.
Well, thank you all a lot. I can't see any of you now. It's an honor and a privilege to be here tonight. And one of the things that Christine omitted, maybe it was intentional on our part not giving her this information, but this is an event that's especially meaningful to me because although I am a developmental psychologist, the other area that I studied as an undergraduate was actually art history. Yeah. Those were my 2 focal areas of study. So I have the great privilege of introducing Dr. Leslie King-Hammond tonight. And please be patient with me. I want to give true homage to our wonderful, wonderful artist that's present. As you know, and I need to change this here. I can't see my notes. Sorry. Too many shadows. As Christine has mentioned, this is the 4th year of the Portland Community College Women in the Arts Lecture Series. And it's dedicated to the pioneering work of women who have worked so hard to call attention to the creation of American women artists. Without their efforts, an enormous amount of art in all forms would be missing from the American landscape. And for that, we would all be much, much poorer. Like Leslie King-Hammond, I too hail from New York. In fact, I'll be returning in just a few weeks. And living so close to New York City has given me the tremendous opportunity to experience an incredible amount of art in all forms, much of which, I'm happy to say, was created by women. One of my favorite places to go in New York is the Brooklyn Museum of Art, and Dr. King-Hammond and I were just talking about this before. And one of the interesting things about that museum is they have permanent exhibits now of women artists and feminist art. In fact, they are the ones who house the, I would consider it to be a seminal work by Judy Chicago called The Dinner Party. If you haven't had a chance to do that and see it, it is a work that you would enjoy seeing. Take a trip, come visit me, and we'll go see it together. From gallery exhibitions, theater, dance and music, my life has been enriched by art, and that is, on a personal level, why these events are so meaningful to me, and I know they are to you. Upon accepting the opportunity to speak to us here in Portland, Dr. King-Hammond said 2 things that intrigued me. One was that Portland had always, she had viewed it as always having its own sense of identity and artistic richness. The other is that her fascination has been with those aspects of America that have not been perceived as part of the mainstream art world. I think if you put those things together, we're in for a very fascinating talk by Dr. King-Hammond this evening. So let me tell you a little bit more about this remarkable person. Leslie King-Hammond is an internationally recognized art historian, curator, artist, and educator. Her talk tonight is entitled An Odyssey of Opportunities, My Life in the Art World. And what a beautiful life it has been. Through her research, writing, and curatorial endeavors, she has brought many historical and contemporary African-American artists into the canon of American art. As a child in New York City, Dr. King-Hammond discovered her love of archaeology and art. She received her Bachelor of Fine Arts from City University of New York, Queens College. And in 1969, she moved to Baltimore to attend Johns Hopkins University, from which she received her PhD in art history in 1976. Her artistic and professional life further developed in Baltimore, primarily at the Maryland Institute College of Art, where she served as Dean of Graduate Studies and taught art history. She is the school's founding director of its Art for Race and Culture and now serves as its Graduate Dean Emerita. The Center for Race and Culture is a very important place. It is an interactive educational center where students can investigate the dynamics of race and culture and their relationship to the visual arts traditions and practice. This prepares students for leadership roles in the art world and gives them the opportunity to work on projects that focus on the aesthetic dynamics of race and culture. While serving at MICA, Dr. King-Hammond was project director for Ford Philip Morris's Fellowship for Artists of Color. She served on innumerable juries, boards, and arts commissions, and was president of the College Art Association. For close to 3 decades, Dr. King-Hammond has served on the advisory board of the Edna Manley School for the Visual Arts in Kingston, Jamaica, and has worked as a board member of the Reginald F. Lewis Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture in Baltimore. For her outstanding and dedicated work, Dr. King-Hammond has won Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Du Bois Circle, the Women's Art Caucus of the College Art Association, and the James A. Porter Colloquium at Howard University. In 2008, she was awarded an Andy Warhol Curatorial Fellowship, and in 2010, Detroit Institute of the Arts gave her the Elaine Locke International Prize. Recently, the Maryland Institute of College of Art honored her by creating the Leslie King-Hammond Graduate Fellowship Award, which will award diverse candidates scholarships to MICA's graduate programs. Over the course of her career, Dr. King-Hammond has written on the works of such artists as Jacob Lawrence, Betty Saar, Amina Robinson, Beverly McIver, and her most recent work is a book on Huey Lee Smith. Her major exhibitions include Celebrations, Myth and Ritual in African American Art, The Intuitive Eye, Art as a Verb, Black Printmakers and the Works Progress Administration, Masters, Mentors, and Makers, and Gumbo Yaya. Dr. King-Hammond's own artwork is described as a visual conversation with the work of the artists she celebrates. I am honored that she has chosen to be here with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Leslie King-Hammond.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. And to all of my wonderful women, Portland Women in the Art Committee, who have been so diligent, so energetic, and so loving in inviting me to come here. I first have to make some confessions. I have no idea why I'm here. When I first got the invitation, I sort of looked at the email and I said, what are they talking about? Usually when I am invited to talk, I am usually talking about somebody else or a group of artists that I am trying to work on or ferret out where their essence wants to be made within the art world, and the issues surrounding what's American about what they're doing, and why have they been hidden in the shadows so long. For me to come and talk about me is like weird. I'm still wrapping my head around that. But then I look in the mirror and I see the gray hair and I go, you're becoming an icon, a barnacle of sorts. And you, as I was trying to put together a talk, I said, you've done a lot of stuff. Your life has been very full. And many of these women that you see here, they have been my mentors, my colleagues. Jean Quick-to-See Smith is a co-conspirator. It's her fault that I became president of the College Art Association completely and totally. I blame it on her. And as I talk, I will tell you how our lives intertwine with each other and why it is, I believe, so important that Portland does this series. I do understand why I have been invited. I just have to grow up and get with it. Right now, I'm just having problems with all these lights because I too can't see you all. Do I have to, can I move away? Can I? Is this better? Oh, this is so better. Can you see me? Yep. Yeah. Down the lights on me. Down the lights on me. I want to see you all, because when I see you all, then I can create my own kind of like momentum. Let me get my tools here. Is there oh, here, this is my clicker? Okay, good. What I would like to do, let me just, I'm pressing something and I'm not getting, what did I do? Huh? Oh, once more? Ah! Yay, very good, very good. I'm supposed to sit on this stool when I'm finished. I'm not finished. I'm just gonna get comfortable. An Odyssey of Opportunities is probably the best way to describe where I began in the art world. And it must be understood that as I began in the art world, I came from a family that were immigrants that came from the island of Barbados via Africa. But my sector of the family ended up in Barbados, and another sector ended up in Guyana. I also believe that some of my family probably were mixed with Indians who came in from Madras, India, when the slave trade was over, because I have whole sections of my family that look just like they got off the boat from India. I could never really understand everything that was going on in my life at the time, because as a child, you are given a template, I call it a template, a lifestyle by your parents, and a set of expectations. The expectations they had for me were not the expectations I had for myself. And so very early on, there was a disjuncture, a disruption around what they wanted me to do and what I was impassioned to do. This picture was given to me by an uncle only very recently in my late adult life. And this is a picture of my family, my great-grandmother, who is the woman holding the little baby on the side, and my grandfather. And I said, oh, wow, this is awesome. And I'm talking to my uncle, who's my mother's younger brother. And I said, so who was he and what was he? Well, my grandfather was a merchant marine. And in my family, many of the men on the island of Barbados within my family line became merchant marines, and they sailed all over the world. This lady on the far end is my grandmother, And these were her siblings. There were ultimately, I think, 8 or 9 of them. So obviously they were very happy, even though he was a merchant marine. But the thing that shocked me the most about this is that as I'm talking about my great-grandmother, I'm looking at her and I'm saying, oh, because in my family and amongst African-American families or families of African descent, we have these wide range of color, you understand, which sometimes cause tension in the family when you have part of the family, the siblings are light and some of them are darker. So I'm looking at my great-grandmother, and as I met her, I didn't meet her until she was 93 years old. And my aunts brought her from the island of Barbados because they thought she was too old to live by herself, and she was livid because they brought her in on a wheelchair, you know, in the airports, and she did not want to communicate with anyone. She was just like, and she was very pale. And so I said to my uncle, I said, was she a mulatto? What was her background? And my uncle looked at me and he says, mulatto? She was a mulatto? I said, well, what was he? She said she was an English one. She was from England. I said, you're kidding. And I'm looking at the picture and I go, wow, she was in the sun a lot. Because she really looked brown to me in this picture. So here, as you all are asking me to talk about my life, it's reminding me that part of the research that I have to do now is to go back and reclaim my ancestry, because I'm fascinated about who this lady was. Where did she meet my grandfather? Did she meet in a port or in a city during his travels? I'm the only one in my family, I'm the eldest of 4, who came out with long hair. When I met her, when she was in the 90s, she had hair, a long braid down to her waist. All right? So there are just enormous questions that I need to have answered that I haven't even begun to tap the surface. And this opportunity to begin to look at my life with other individuals who are trying to understand how individuals like me ended up in the arts is an opportunity for me to do the same kind of critical interrogation that needs to be done. So here I am looking at this family. All the men on the island of Barbados were given trades or taught to be master carpenters. All of the women were given skills in the area of what I call needlesmithing, knitting, crocheting, tatting, drawn thread embroidery, straight up embroidery, all kinds of fiber arts. All of my aunts, my grandmother came to the United States, migrated around World War I. They all left Barbados except my great-grandmother. My great-grandfather had already passed, and all of my aunts migrated to the United States, and they settled in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Harlem, and then later on in the next generations, they moved out to Queens, New York. I was born in the Bronx, in the South Bronx, and I'm probably like the first generation who was born and raised in this country. Most of my mother and my father and many of my aunts and uncles were either born in Barbados and came to the United States and then were sent back, which was typical, very much like Southern black families, or they were born in the United States, and while their parents worked, they were sent back and raised by the elders. So this uncle that gave me the picture was raised by this grandmother. As I began to grow up in the arts world, I quickly began to realize that the art world, there was no place for me. There was no definition for who I could look to. There were no models, there were no examples. I would go to the library, I couldn't find any books about artists of color like myself. I couldn't find books about women. There was just nothing out there, but I had a passion for the arts. Now, in a Caribbean family, we are very strict in the upbringing and the protocol around how you are supposed to have a life, and you are supposed to have a productive life. Idle hands are the devil's workshop, and if you're not doing something serious or important, you have got to be in trouble. So I was expected not only to do and be as excellent as I could in school, but when I was not in school, I would have to have other aspects of my cultural development. I had another uncle who was a concert pianist, and so I was forced to take piano lessons, which I hated with a passion. He would come every week to torture me. And every week he found out I learned less than the week before. So by the time I was in 3rd grade and I won a little poster contest, my family said, oh, well, maybe she likes art. Well, that didn't hearten them at all, because at the time in the United States, people who were in love with the arts or making creative work were not looked upon as becoming profitable in life, functional. My mother kept saying, well, how are you going to raise a family? How are you going to get a job? I didn't care. I was just like in love with the whole aspect of making. And so when I would have my moments as a child, and I was not interested in being civil with the family, or I was having problems and I was given time out and I was sent to my room, I would go underneath my bed, and my father had given me a cigar box. That was when Cuban cigars, it was okay to smoke. And he would give me those beautiful boxes, and in that box I would have my stuff that I could make stuff. So I would have scraps, cork, pieces of metal, any kind of ephemera. But at the same time, I would become fascinated with how those very simple, mundane objects could then be cut, crafted, and put together to make beautiful things. How did that happen? My grandmother was a seamstress in the garment district in New York. And I used to watch her, and I was a very sickly child. In fact, I was about 95% dead when I was born. Anyway, I'm here. I just somehow, I just said, no, I'm not going to succumb to all of that stuff that befell me as a child. I'm moving forward. I don't know if I was hardwired or whatever, but I survived. And as I was coming into my own, while my family was hypersensitive about me doing anything because they thought I would fall sick and drop dead or something, whatever, I was still trying to figure out how to live my life. And my grandmother, because I was so tiny and so small, she would bring home scraps from the garment district to make me clothes. And she would not use a pattern. And I would remember how she would take a piece of cloth and she would lay it across my body and she would say, don't move. And she had a pair of 10-inch shears and she would cut a pattern. She would cut all these abstract shapes. And then she would sit at the sewing machine and I would sit right next to her because I was just amazed. And I would watch her make these incredible garments and then fit me. My brother called me like a little princess because she used to dress me up with all these wonderful clothes. I never knew I was working class poor because I was always so well dressed. My grandmother, I was the apple of her eye. I got unconditional love. My mother hated it. So then life, as I'm living it, becomes more intense and messy as life can be, because that's what the business of being human is about. And no family is perfect, and I'm growing up, and I'm beginning to realize things are not exactly right in the house. Okay, I don't like what's going on in my home. I don't have any control over it, but I'm hostage, Don't have a job, I'm not 18, I can't drive, don't have bank account, and I know that there's trouble in the house. And I'm not alone, because there are a lot of families, there are a lot of children that grow up and find out, oops, I'm in a situation where I can't get out of it and I have to find a way to cope. At the same time, I'm growing up in a time where the civil rights era is beginning to not blossom, but surge. It's the 50s. And things are really becoming very, very difficult. Television is being developed, and we have our little box, and I'm watching things on the TV, and I'm seeing dogs, and I'm seeing hoses, and I'm going, like I'm around 10 years old, I'm going, I'm not liking this world very much. So one day I'm walking to school, and I pass the corner where I go to the elementary school, and I look up on the lamppost, and I see this poster. And I'm like, I can't figure out what I'm looking at. And I'm looking, and I still can't figure out what I'm looking at. Every day, I pass this poster. But when I go home, I never say anything to my parents that I have seen this poster. After a while, either through some words that my parents have said or some newspapers that I have read, I figure out that I am looking at the funeral scene of Emmett Till. Emmett Till was a young teenager in Mississippi who apparently was believed to have whistled at a white woman, and he was assassinated and thrown into a body of water. And it took days for him to be found, and he was sent home to Chicago to be buried, and his family, his mother, was so mortified, so horrified, that she allowed for her son to be shot in the casket and posters to be made that were sent all over to the black communities in the United States and stapled to the lampposts. This image haunted me until I was in my 40s. I never spoke about it to anyone, not even to my colleagues. And it wasn't until I was on a panel in Virginia once where we were talking about the impact of memory and family, and I began to talk about this, and all the people in the panel just looked at me and they went, "Oh my God, you just had an epiphany." And then I understood what the epiphany was about. But I'm 10 years old. So of course, at this point, I have to recognize in retrospection that there went my childhood, on top of the fact that I knew that things were not right in my family. And I was increasingly becoming extremely shy and very recessive and very retired to my own world because I did not like the world that I was living in. So I'm going on through school, and I am now asked to read, as part of my curricular assignments, the Diary of Anne Frank. And I'm reading about a young girl who dies, who's probably around the same age as I am reading her diaries. And I'm learning about the Holocaust. A few years after that, they released the photographs from the Holocaust, and I'm watching bodies being bulldozed. And I didn't realize that impact until one day I'm watching television with my young son, and he's watching students being shot in Tiananmen Square, and he's like 9, 10 years old, and he's looking at me and he's saying, "Mom, are they shooting the students? Are they killing them?" And I went, "Oh my God." And I'm flashing back to Emmett Till, and I'm flashing back to Anne Frank. Then I'm in high school. Civil rights marchers, revolts, the dogs, the hoses, the freedom riders. And in New York, where I'm living, the churches are organizing, and they're going to go down to the March on Washington. And my little cousin and I, we in high school, get on a little yellow school bus, terrified to go down to the March on Washington. We had had bitter battles with our families about going, but we were absolutely committed to going. So realizing that they couldn't stop us, and that this was our generation, our time, and this was a church-led group, we got on the bus and we left and we went down to Washington. We drove for about 3 hours. We didn't see anyone. It was a horribly scary experience. It wasn't until we got about an hour outside of Washington, D.C., and all of a sudden we started to see some buses from Philadelphia and from Delaware. And there were white people on the bus, and we didn't know what that meant, and we didn't know if they were with this kind of like momentum going into Washington. And all of a sudden, in one of the buses, the people waved at us, and we waved at them, and we all knew that we were going to the same place. These are things, these are instances as I'm going back, wondering how I began to take my interest in the arts and craft it into something that would make impact and change. I liked the arts, but I didn't like the arts enough that I had the ambition or the ego to want to be a great artist. Who knows what that is? Having worked with so many artists and understanding the kind of work that is essential, you never know. But I knew that there were so many artists that were not recognized that maybe, just maybe, there might be a way for me to be a vehicle to help facilitate a change in that arena. Between the March on Washington and my first major exhibition was a whirlwind of changes in my life. I first went to Buffalo State University to study there, and that was just the biggest, worst mistake in my life. There was just too much freaking snow. When you wake up in the morning and you're in a dormitory and you're on the second floor and you look out the window and the snowdrift comes up to the windowsill, or you try to get out the front door and you can't get to the dining hall, which is across the street, and the boys' dorm has to make a human chain to walk across to the food chain. I said, that's it. I need asphalt, I need concrete, for a sustained period of time. And the snow in Baltimore and Buffalo did not melt till May. So I was out of there. I then went to the New School of Social Research. And while I was at this New School of Social Research, which is a very progressive college in New York, I was working at the General Electric Company as a service representative in their station site in Grand Central Station, where people would get off the train from Scarsdale, drop off their toasters, and then they would pick them up on the way back, and they would go back to Scarsdale. That life sucked also. Especially after the guy who was coming back to pick up his toaster, I had to tell him that we couldn't fix the toaster because it was infested. And then he would say, infested with what? And I would take the plastic baggie and I would go, with that? And those little things with their legs up in the air would be looking at him. So I had to give up that life also. So then I decided to get a job. My mother said, oh no, you've got to do something. And I was using art as my therapy. I was just like dealing with all of this crazy stuff in the world, and I would go in my room, shut the door, and I would just make stuff. I began to have my own little dress design business, and I would make clothes for people. I'd make clothes for my little sisters. I became the seamstress in the family, but I was making stuff, all right? So at the same time, I'm also deciding I'll work for an anti-poverty program, which was big during the 60s. And so I went to work for an anti-poverty program in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and I taught art on the streets of Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. Every day I would go to 2 locations. I had a truck of semi-juvenile delinquents who were supposed to help me, and I would have art easels and materials, or go to park and I would set it up. And I loved it, but it only lasted for two months, so that was over. In the course of that, someone came around looking for my students to give them an opportunity to go to college. And I said, these kids are mostly sophomores and juniors, and I don't think they're going to be ready for college anytime soon. Well, the young woman was very frustrated. She said, well, have you finished college? I said, no, I'm still going to the New School of Social Research, and I, probably have a couple more years. in terms of what I want to accomplish. She said, give me your name and address. Fine. Summer ends, I'm sitting at home. Good West Indian mother is tapping on the kitchen table, you know, and it's those enamel tables, so her nails are like ta-dun, 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 ta-dun. And what are you going to do now? And I had not really thought about what I was going to do, and I didn't really have a plan. So I'm opening up my mail, which I had sort of let pile up, and I open up this one letter and I go, Mom, read this letter. She reads the letter, and she looks at me, and she gets up, she goes to the living room, she comes back with her purse, and she goes into her purse, and she pulls out a $20 bill, and she gives it to me. She said, you will first call the number on the letter. She said, then you will take a shower, you will change your clothes and wear something decent, and you will do whatever they tell you to do. The letter was a full scholarship with tuition, books, materials, anything I needed to finish my college degree at any city university in the state of New York. Unfreaking believable. The rest is almost history, because up until this time, my parents were really terrified about my life and my future. I would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to watch PBS when they had their first archaeology courses, college courses, sunrise semester. And I would, if I couldn't be there because I had to be at school, I would make my mother take notes, because I found that archaeology was a way to figure out how I could make peace with a world that I thought was falling apart. And I figured if archaeologists could go in the ground and dig a hole and bring up fragments, fibers, detritus, whatever, and reassemble it to tell us how life was lived in past centuries, that there was hope in a future if I could utilize this information in some way. I move on from Queens College, where I ended up going. I then apply for another scholarship with the Ford Foundation. They're going to give, this is now the assassination of Martin Luther King. People are crazy. They're rioting all over the place. Martin Luther King is dead, and all of a sudden I see another scholarship on the wall, and I know intuitive, I said, there's something weird about this, but I'm going to apply anyway. I apply, I don't get it. It's okay. During that time, in that era, I started getting special delivery letters at 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. After about 3 weeks, I had about 25 or 30 letters from colleges all over the United States offering me full scholarship to go and get my doctorate. I could not freaking figure out what was going on until I got a letter from Johns Hopkins University. And the letter described how the Ford Foundation had offered fellowships for 50 students to get full paid scholarships to get their doctoral degrees. After they filled their quota, they wrote to all the universities in the United States and they said, look, we ran out of money, but if you all have money, this is the list of people that we would give awards to. My name was the only name in the art category under art history. Voila, here I am again. I'm going, I don't know where my life is taking, but I'm on this journey, okay? I'm gonna ride this. So I go to Hopkins, all right? I go to Hopkins to get my doctorate. Now, you would think my parents would be happy, right? Nope. What are you doing? Who are you trying to prove? What are you trying to show off? Nobody in my family, but one other cousin I had that went on to medical school. But I was getting a doctorate, and there was something extremely intimidating about that. They said, what are you going to major in? Art history. They said, oh, she's gone. She's nuts. There's no way she's going to make it, okay? Finish Hopkins, come out of Hopkins, get married, get hired by the Maryland Institute College of Art, get appointed dean of the graduate school. You know, it's like, if any of you have seen that old classic movie, The Putney Swope, all right? If not, look it up, all right? It's the black person in the boardroom, and everybody is looking at somebody to elect to the next position. So they point to this one black candidate and they say, we'll elect Putney Swope because they figure he's not going to make it, and he does. I'm the Putney Swope in my family, all right? I have this uncanny ability, it appears, to garner these experiences. So here I am at the Maryland Institute College of Art. I'm now the Dean of Graduate Studies, black female, unheard of. The art world has not been designed for me. It's supposed to be white, I'm supposed to be male, I'm supposed to be at least fairly middle class, you know, or have some entitlements. I am none of those. I am from New York, I have an unfiltered mouth, I'm passionate, I do, I say. I'm like, this is really weird. Then I get my first invitation to do the major show for the Studio Museum in Harlem, where they're opening their major space in a rehabilitated building on 125th Street. Bam! I am now legit. I have a doctorate, I have my first catalog, I am really on a move, because as I am working at the Maryland Institute College of Art, which is founded in 1826, I am telling individuals in the community who want me to work with them, whether it's a church, whether it's an elementary school, that yes, I'll work with you, but what I want you to do in return is, you don't have to pay me, don't pay me, but I want you to make a document. I want you to make a little catalog, a brochure, because what I found is, for women, for people of color, for any underrepresented, misrepresented group of individuals, if you don't write your own history, if you don't document it, it's just like you never existed before. When I was doing my dissertation, the thing that I learned the most was to listen to the voice of the artist. I am not a theorist. I have a friend who says, form first, theory last. I am a person who reveres the work of the hand, whether it's craft, whether it is an educated person with a degree, or whether it is a self-educated person. But there is something sacred about that process. So when I did this survey, this celebrations, ritual and myth, and African American art, this was a big thing. I mean, my name went in the New York Times, and my family were like, ooh, like, she's really serious. I mean, they were in awe that I even got the doctorate, and, you know, and all of a sudden they flood to graduation, you know, like expecting me to speak in an art speak voice, and I'm still talking like me, being like me, just doing what I'm doing. Then I'm at the Maryland Institute College of Art, and the president of the school is telling me all the time, Leslie, stop working with the community. You're supposed to be working on campus. Why are you doing all this stuff out in the other world? Stop this. And I said, why? I could not be where I am if I were not indebted to community projects, after-school programs, Bible school programs, the Fresh Air Fund, where they ran a summer camp. I mean, any place, the Girl Scouts. I was a Girl Scout, can you believe? These were ways and means for me to get knowledge, to get experience, to be around people with like minds. So the president says, one day he goes out somewhere, and it appears that he has heard from another constituency institution that I did a show for them and the impact that it made on their community. So he comes back and he says, okay, I'm sick of it. I want you to do a show here. I said, here where? He said, at MICA, Maryland Institute College of Art. I'm done. Do a show here. I said, fine. He says, I want a show of black artists. I said, you know, I understand. Everybody wants a show of black artists, most especially when you get near Black Hysterical Month. That's what we call it in our trade. You know, there are 11, 12 months in the year, but when February comes, everybody has to do something black, all right? So I said, no. So here I am, my girlfriend and I, we create this show called Artists of Verb. What is it? Artists of Verb was a show that asked the question, was done 1989, 88, 89. It asked the question, where were black artists going to be, artists of African descent, going to be when the millennium came? Where were they going to be in the future of the art world, all right? What kind of materials, what kind of technologies? They were not getting any opportunities. You have to also realize that this is the period of time that the feminist movement was beginning to just reap havoc throughout the art world. You have to remember that this is the period that the guerrilla girls were running through New York, and they had cells and cores all over the United States, and they were doing disruptions everywhere. And so I said, I want to look at, Lowry Sims and I did this, and Lowry Sims was my co-conspirator. She was curator of 20th century art at the Met, the first African-American curator there. And she and I would combine our research to create projects that we could not do in other sites. So Artists of Verb was the first time at an institution where we could do the kind of work we wanted to do. This was Senga Ngugi. And Senga Ngugi came out of LA. She was a friend of David Hammonds. She was a friend of Betty Saar. She was a friend of Marion Hassinger. And she would, because she was a mother at the time, she would use panty stockings, pantyhose, all right? And she would fill them with sand. And she would talk about the flexibility and the malleability of a woman's body by using these pantyhose that she would stretch within the galleries to make these enormous installations. Artists of Verb also had to do it. Bring those lights down just a little bit for me, please, as long as it doesn't bother the cameras so you can see this. We also had in the show Joyce Scott, and Joyce Scott was a bead artist. And in her beading, Joyce was doing a series of what you call birthing chairs. Now, I have to say that being in Baltimore has been a wonderful experience because Baltimore is very arts user friendly. And you can do almost anything, and you very rarely, if ever, get censored. As soon as we moved this show to New York, where it was supposed to be, where it was installed at the MetLife Gallery and the Studio Museum in Harlem, okay? The MetLife Gallery rejected these works because they did not want to see a woman's orifice, one of her orifices, giving birth to a baby. And if you'll notice that it is a yellow woman or a white woman, and the baby coming out is black. And they said that the board at the MetLife Gallery would be offended by these works. I said, whatever, as long as the work is going to show. So the Studio Museum agreed to show this work, and Joyce had several of these birthing chair sequences. And what she was talking about is, of course, that the world was evolving and changing, and that while the systems and the systemic nature of racism was prevailing, that the rest of the world was moving forward, and people were bonding and creating new families of diverse colors and cultures. Then I had David Hammonds come and do an installation at MICA. And this is an installation that he did first in New York and Queens, and it was in honor of the rap artist, Kool Moe Dee, who did a rap called How You Like Me Now. But at the same time in history, Jesse Jackson was running for president. So this was a chalk drawing, a conceptual piece that David did on the wall. He did the piece, he put How You Like Me Now, all right? And this piece, too, when it was installed in DC, was attacked. And when it was supposed to go to New York, the Studio Museum says, we will not allow a David Hammond's piece to hang in our museum. This is a black artist. That was a black museum. What's up? Well, David Hammonds, and I could tell David Hammond's stories forever. But David Hammonds was one of those outre, brilliant, genius artists who's still alive or well living in Harlem, who did work that really defied anything around the aesthetics of what a mainstream art world would expect from a black artist. It was hard enough for you to be a painter, hard enough for you to be a printmaker. Just Google David Hammonds for those of you who don't know him. He is a shaman. He is a shaman. So they didn't want this piece in Harlem. They said, no, we're not going to have a David Hammond's piece. We're not going to have that piece because it's just it's incendiary. So I said, fine. So I said, can David still show? Well, we'll give him a wall and he'll have to bring something in. All right, David Hammonds agrees to show at the Studio Museum in Harlem. They don't know what he's going to bring. I get a call one day while they're doing the installation of Artists of Verb there, and they're hysterical. Leslie, David has arrived with the piece. I said, fine, what's up? We don't know what to do with it or where to put it. I said, well, we know that David does unorthodox pieces. What is the piece that he did? Do you know what he did this time? No, just tell me. In fact, I called David. David, what did you do? I didn't do anything. I was just walking past the Pathmark supermarket. And I went in and I saw a package of drumsticks. And I took the drumsticks back home and I fried up the drumsticks. And I took some cord and I tied it around so that they were like drumsticks hanging like grapes. And I took them into the museum on my finger like this. And they were warm. It was still warm. And I'm just envisioning this. And the other curators on the other phone, and I'm going, and so what's the problem? We don't know where to put what do we do with this chicken? I said, take a nail, ask David where to put the nail on the wall. David showed them. We're doing this all over the phone. And I said, take the string and ask David if it's okay to take the drumsticks and put it on the thing. We got the drumsticks on the wall. David leaves the museum. The name of the show is Artists of Verb, all right? Now, for you to really understand why there's chicken on the wall and why David has had this contentious relationship with the Studio Museum, is that in the first years of Studio Museum's life of becoming a museum in Harlem, their first space was located in a loft over Kentucky Fried Chicken on the corner of 125th Street and Lenox, okay? On top of that, David Hammonds, Jorge Rodriguez, and Charles Abramson were the artists in residence for those first years. And that meant that these artists, and this was very new to have artists in residence inside, in situ, on site at a museum, could have access to the museum. And they would bribe the guards at night with some wine, and then they would set up their hot plates, and when the Kentucky Fried Chicken place was closed, they would fry their own chicken and and give the guards so that they could stay all night, because the museum didn't want them there at night. So when the directors would come in the morning, all they would smell is fried chicken, fresh fried chicken, not the old fried chicken from the Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they couldn't figure out where this chicken was. So when David did the chicken piece for my Artists of Verb, it was like a throwback, you understand, to the days when they would have these constant battles. And when I got up to see the exhibition, by that time, the grease spot on the wall from where the chicken was so palpable, okay? And now the chicken was putrid. So there was essence in the room. Then I went on in the 90s, all right, to become, as a result of Jean Quick-to-See's strategic moves, the president of the College Art Association, where I was the first African American. But at the same time, I was then asked to curate a show in Philadelphia that dealt with, and actually what they did was they said, Leslie, we want you to do a show. I said, fine. What do you want? And they said, well, we don't know, but what's the impact? Well, doing my art history, one of the phenomenons that we have discovered within the annals of African American artists is that in the aftermath of slavery, men became the painters and the women became sculptors. Really weird, okay? Well, I had a colleague at Howard University by the name of Tritobia Benjamin, and I love to work in collaboration and partnerships. And I called Tritobia Benjamin and I said, Toby, I said, you know, I've been asked to do a show in Philadelphia. Now, let's take your thesis, because she did her master's thesis on female sculptors, black female sculptors, excuse me, and let's see if we can expand the whole conversation and do a show. And so what we did was, come on, we started in the beginning of history, and we had one scholar talk about women sculptors in Africa. Then I had another scholar come in and talk about women sculptors in the first part of the 20th century. This is an example of one of the pieces, Meta Warwick Fuller, who was absolutely a bomb. This lady was so, I mean, she was well brought up, well educated. She was from a black bourgeois family. She married a doctor. The doctor thought that she was just making art because she needed something to do on Sundays, which was her free day. And she was very serious about it. She had gone to Paris to study before she married. And she continued to do work. This is called Ethiopia Awakening, which is also that moment in African American history where people are beginning to reconcile their legacy as having come from Africa, dealing with their Egyptian and Ethiopian ancestry, and all the things that had to do with coming from the motherland. Well, come to find out, as we're doing research on this woman, she was so fierce that she allowed her husband to think that she was really just taking care of the 3 sons and being the dutiful wife of a doctor and doing all of those things, until one day he is asking her where she's going, and she said, "Oh, I'm going to my studio." He said, "What studio?" She said, "The one I built down the road." He said, "What road?" She said, "The road on which we have our house here, I have my studio there." Girlfriend had her own money. She never stopped making her sculpture. She made a studio. She never said anything to him. She didn't have to. She had her own resources. And she continued to work, and she continued to be one of the pioneers. So the beauty of this project was that we got to tell the story of these fierce women sculptors who, many of them came out of the Philadelphia metropolitan area and went on to make critical impact throughout the 19th century and all the way back into the 19th century with Edmonia Lewis, who was Native American and African American and was the first one to make impact. The other one, this is a Nancy Elizabeth Prophet, and I show you this one because she came out of Rhode Island, in Narragansett. She was also part Native American. And she too was interested, this is a piece called Congolese. She was interested, both of these women were interested in the innumerable variable types of African-based people that were emerging in the Americas as a result of slavery and all of the race mixing that had gone on. This piece is important because it was Gertrude Whitney who bought this piece. And those of you who don't know Gertrude Whitney, she was responsible for founding the Whitney Museum of Art. So this was, she was supported by the patronage. But her story, don't have time to tell that story, enormously fascinating stories. Then at the same time, all of this is going on, I'm now a single parent. I don't have a husband. I'm raising 2 sons. And I have another colleague, Deborah Willis, who is a foremost photographer and a MacArthur Genius Award. She's working at the Smithsonian, and she says, "Leslie, I'm doing this show called Artist Scholar," and we collaborated. All of us, we had to work in the wee hours of the night. It was nothing for us to be on the telephone 11, 12, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. This is when we got our work done. We would do all of our side projects, talking with each other all night long. My telephone bills were like $300, $400, $500 a month without exception. She says, I'm doing this show, Artist Scholar. And I said, oh, she said, who do you think should be in it? So of course, David Driscoll, who's the godfather of art history in the 20th century, was in the show. And there were several other artists, and they were all guys. So I said, let me think about it. So a couple of days later, I happened to call her, and I said, guess what? I found this drawing that I did, this study I did of myself when I was about 9 or 10 years old. So there I am with my self-portrait that I did when I was 9 or 10 years old. She screams to her husband. She found her self-portrait when she was 10 years old. She's in the show. I went, no, I'm not. She said, yes, you are. I said, no, I'm not. Within a month, she and her whole curatorial team were in my house, plowing through things. I said, I do work for me. It's my work. She said, no longer. She said, you're out of the closet. It's over, okay? It's over. We had one of the largest openings at the Smithsonian for this show called Artist Scholar, and I believe that people were so curious about what I was doing and how I was doing it, that they came just because they were just wanted to be there at the moment to see me embarrassed. This is one of my earlier pieces. I was a painter originally. I started off as a painter at Queens College. I got my master's in painting and in ceramic as a minor, and I loved doing studies, abstract studies. This is not only abstract, but also woven, because I was also interested in fiber traditions and fiber techniques. But the thing that I really love doing is building altars and installations. Part of it is because my grandmother was the person who tended the altars in her church for over 35 years. And she made all of the vestments for the priests, all of the vestments for the choir master, and all of the draperies and the cloths for the altar itself. And as I remembered her as a seamstress making things for me, she was the one that made the greatest impact. In the frames are stitched, crocheted, tatted pieces that my aunts had done. Around the altar are also pieces that my aunts had done, as well as found objects, because I love collecting doilies and laces, because those are the things, women's work, where women express their own creativity. Not all women used magazines to make these things that ornamented and decorated their homes. The base of the installation is rice, because in my culture on the island, we eat peas and rice, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Plates all around, because as I grew up, I was very quickly, by the time I was 12 years old, I could cook massive feasts because I had a huge family and we were always feeding people. If we didn't do anything else, we could feed you. Then in 2001, 9/11 occurred. 9/11 happened, and we were having a faculty exhibition, and I was going to put in another piece of work, and I felt that under the situation that it was not appropriate what I was going to put in, and so I created an altar, and this is the altar for the warrior spirits of 9/11. This one, and I do these pieces because this is what I live. My house is like that. My girlfriends call my house the biggest Vodun factory on the East Coast, because I'm always collecting stuff and putting it together, and it's all sacred, and it's all coming out of traditions that are practiced still in Africa, still in the southern regions of the United States, in the front yards of San Francisco and Oakland, and these are things that I have grown up and lived with. So here on the walls behind are the prayers that began to appear in all of the newspapers. The base is soil, and then I sent out an e-blast across Micah's campus, and I invited people to bring in portraits of family members who had passed in that particular cycle of time in the past year, so that the people who did die and we didn't have their pictures, and there are empty picture frames around because we at the time did not know all of the names of all the victims, so that their spirits would not be alone and that they would be comforted, having been unceremoniously and rather viciously and violently had their lives terminated. So I'm going in and out of class, school is disrupted, the world is disrupted, and my assistant says to me, Leslie, Ms. Magazine just called and asked for a photograph of your installation. I said, what installation? They said, the 9/11 installation. I said, how would Ms. Magazine know about this is Baltimore. That's New York, okay? Well, I sat down for a minute and I thought, and one of the things that happens, just like you brought me here, we bring people to MICA, and I had just brought the philosopher and art critic Arthur Danto to campus to do a series of lectures for me. I forgot that Arthur Danto would write regular art columns for The Nation magazine. So I sat and I thought for a minute and I said, did Arthur do something? And I flew out the office, I ran to the library, I got the recent issue of The Nation magazine, and I'm looking at it, and here's an article by Arthur Danto, and it says, Artist's Response to 9/11. And I'm reading the article, and you know, artists get all, soft and fuzzy and warm and welled up when they see their name. And then they see one line and then another line. Well, I had a cardiac arrest after the third paragraph. I was like, oh my God. What happened is that Ms. Magazine put me in Women of the Year, and I was in the last full page to acknowledge the achievements of women in that particular year. And it was just like, wow. So I was like, and you see, I'm with Yoko Ono and all these other people, and this was not my intent. It wasn't, my art is not supposed to be about me. It's just me, that's my therapy, right? This is how I work through, but then at the same time, I'm still being asked to write about artists, and I have an opportunity to write a series for Pomegranate Press, who's doing a series on African American artists, and I'm working on the artist Huey Lee Smith. And Huey Lee is a very interesting artist from the modernist period, active from like the late 30s to the early 90s. And he talks about the disparity in urban environments. So these jetties are like the remnants of urban environments or cities that are decomposing because of the nature of technology. He uses streamers and sometimes balloons to talk about lost longings. As a child, when he was growing up, he was an only child and they raised him as a prince. He was a black middle-class young man. He could sing opera. He was in the theater, and many of these are staged like their theater. And his grandmother thought that carnivals and circuses were for the pedestrian lowlife, and she didn't want him to attend. But as a child, looking at all of these carousels and the balloons and the streamers and the ribbons, those were things that he also longed for. And so he would sort of include these in the compositions. He was a wonderful man. At the same time, while I'm doing the 9/11 piece, I'm working on Jacob Lawrence, I'm working on Romeo Bearden. I've had an abundantly blessed career to work with so many artists who were pivotal members of the art world, and through some of my writings, I have been able to kind of catapult them or move them to the next level of recognition. Huey Lee Smith was one of those. This is a peace of mind because my students didn't believe that when I was teaching and doing critiques that I could do art. So I teach traditional African art forms, and one day, they were getting into all of the mysticism and magic, and I said, there's no mysticism or magic. I said, I'm going to take you through an exercise, and I'm going to show you how in certain traditions within the Congo region, Congo Angola, among the Congo Kongo people, how communities come together to create works of art in order to heal the community. And so my son and I, by this time, my DNA, I have two sons. One is a phantom warrior, and the other one is my DNA, who actually. So my sons, I often elicited their help, and we got a baby doll, and we tore up the baby doll, and I got a piece of wood, and I attached the baby doll arms and legs to it and put the head on top so that I would have a wood base. And an inkisi is an object where nails are driven into the body of the subject, and then attached to those nails, the individual ties a string or a knot as a commitment. Why? What happens is if you are ill or someone in your family is ill or not doing well, and you go to a healer, the healer will say, you need to make an object which shows a communal commitment. That means everybody in the community and the family are charged with the responsibility of helping this person get well. So every person must drive a nail in, and then you must take a piece of fabric, a string, a piece of grass. You may attach a shell, a nut, a bone, or anything that you think will give another layer of power. And you tie a knot, because by tying a knot, you complete the commitment, you tie it to the nail, and you drive it in. One of the most incredible things was to watch the students' faces as they saw the piece emerge. They went, oh my God. I said, that's how power is accumulated. It is collective. So I call this Inkisi for Micah, and it is an evolving piece. It started in 1998, and it still grows. This is a piece that I did for a show because I belong to an artist collective of women called the Girls of Baltimore. Joyce Scott, you saw her work earlier, is in that collective. And Joyce was asked to do a huge retrospective show of her work. And there was an extra gallery, and she said, I'd like the girls to show. We met, we decided that the theme of our show would be Harriet Tubman, who, if you all are watching about the $20 bill, Harriet Tubman has been sort of voted, you know, by Twitters or Facebook or whatever to be the next face on the $20 bill because we have no women. So this is called Dark Journey. This is actually a quilt strip piece, very narrow pieces with beading with the state of Maryland that I embroidered on it. This is an inkisi that I made on the quilt, which empowered her with the wisdom and the vision and the use of the North Star and the drinking gourd as it is created. And I make pieces, embroidered pieces, in the tradition of women's work and the work that my own family. I found a shawl, an old ancient linen shawl. I love thrift shops. I love just going to Goodwill. I love just finding old crappy stuff, okay? And because old crappy stuff has lived a life, and it has energy, and it has meaning, and it has been places that we haven't been, and I take those and incorporate it into my art. And this is a prayer shawl for Harriet Tubman. In the photographs, when you see her, she is always wearing a little collar of lace or cuffs of lace, which was the Victorian standard of the time. And so in my collection of lace, and now that I'm supposed to be retired, I'm going back to use more of my lace pieces. In 2010, Lowry Sims, who is now left the Metropolitan Museum of Art, she has become president of the Studio Museum of Harlem, and she's left there, and now she is the curator in residence at the Museum of Art and Design, and they asked her to do a show on Black artists. And she goes, I'm not doing that. She says, and whatever I do, I'm gonna do it with Leslie. Well, Lowry and I both went to Queens College. We have a huge history. We were even Girl Scouts together. That's how incestuous it was. We even found out that our divorced fathers dated the same woman. So it's just, that's how crazy it got. So anyway, she decided that we should do a show on the African diaspora, and we called it the Global Africa Project. And we looked at photography, design, and craft traditions that were being exercised in the 21st century. We got no less than 3 full-page acknowledgments in the New York Times, 3 weeks in a row. Unbelievable. This is Kehinde Wiley on the cover of the catalog. This is Kim Schwimmerham from South Africa, a white South African. People were saying, well, it's only going to be black people. No. We are doing people who identify with Africa as a psychic place of reference. And we are doing things where the artists are looking at the economy, the politics, the stresses on the economy, AIDS, all of those, genocide, everything. So this piece, which is marquetry, wood, beautifully crafted, and these are all of the sayings or mottos in South Africa that had to do with the restrictions around apartheid. And on the other side are all of the passports that South Africans had to use in order to go from any sector of the country. And he collected all of them and created this huge panel. It was a magnificent statement in the exhibition. This museum, the Reginald Lewis Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture, was also part of the Global Africa Project show. And in this piece, this was an African American architectural firm that designed it. This is the museum where I am the chair of the board of this museum. I also was the first one to conceptualize the content and the approach for the museum. This is the back of the cover of the magazine, and this is a piece by Sonia Clark, who is a fiber artist that does extraordinary things. My final exhibition, and not final, but the biggest one where I got the Andy Warhol grant, was for African Americans and Biblical Imagery, a project that I've been working on for about 10 years under the aegis of Vincent Winbush. African Americans and Biblical Imagery was about the relationship that people of African descent had with the Bible and with the church. The irony is that in the history of this phenomenon, when Africans were brought here, they were forbidden to read or write. The irony is that the only book that was available for them to have access to was the Bible. And so as they read the Bible, they created their own understanding of the Bible because the Bible was used against them to reinforce their enslavement. However, they came up with a very different interpretation of how the Bible was applied. So I called the show Ashe to Amen. Ashe is a Yoruba term which means to make it happen, the power to make it happen. Amen is like the finale, and it is the balance to both. This is a postcard that I had in the catalog, which talks about how these images were made to be distributed throughout different communities to show people how plantation owners were taking care of the moral aspects of their slaves. These little mulattoes, maybe, octoroons, quadroons. This is out of New Orleans. And so depending on how much black blood was in you, they had special terminologies for you. And then here is a gentleman who obviously is most likely first generation African based. These were some of the images, singing saints from the WPA period. This is a scene of a passing of an individual and the celebratory moments of exaltation as the spirit passes. This is a spirit bottle made by Oletha Defane, who got so caught up in the making of her spirit bottle that when the movers, the art movers, came to pick it up, it was made out of shotgun casings. And someone asked her if, well, they asked me if in fact the shotgun casings were alive. And I said, oh no, of course not. So of course when the movers got there and they saw it, they said, are these live? And she said, yes, they're alive. Well, we had to reject the piece because of course who's going to transport across state lines live ammo? So this piece missed it for the exhibition in New York where it opened. But when it opened in Baltimore and in Memphis, in its next venues, she had another piece with empty casings. The last part of this talk is about a piece that was done by my partner and I when we were asked to participate in a show at the New York Historical Society. I don't know if you all remember in the early 90s that New York discovered that underneath 4 office buildings, there was an African burial ground with upwards of 20,000 people buried in it. Well, New York decided to come to terms with its participation in the cotton industry and the slavery that also existed in New York. Well, we were commissioned, my partner, now husband, is an architect, and we were commissioned to do a piece because he and I have always been fascinated with what we call praise houses. And these are little tiny houses that are done in the southern regions of the United States and throughout the Caribbean, where African Americans found sanctuary, safety to practice their religion and to teach each other to read and write. So one day I'm doing some research and I go back to his house and I'm like hysterical. I said, Jose, I found this map of a village in New York City on Central Park West between 85th Street to 89th Street. And this map talked about a village that existed in what is now Central Park that had over 300 people living in it. Freed African Americans living in this city. They also had about 4 Irish families, about 4 German families. They had 3 churches, they had a greenhouse, they had 4 tracts of farmland. This was a thriving, vibrant community, which was removed by eminent domain because New York needed reservoirs, and they wanted that spot. These people bought their land. When we went to the records, we have all of their names on every plot of land. We have not been able to track or find any of these families from that history. We were so moved by this story that he and I created this, what is called Praise House for Seneca Village, to remind people of the legacy. So my husband, being the architect, creates this plexi structure. I beaded a floor with symbols from all of the African communities and cultures that might have influenced this. The beading is really a takeoff on Haitian voodoo flags that you will see. The base on which it is sitting is some Ashoki cloth from Nigeria, and underneath that was a star, 4 points, crocheted by some unknown women, but an 8-point star has to do with the equilibrium in the universe and also aligns itself with Congo traditions in terms of what we call the 4 moments of the sun, or the 4 phases in life. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, my life still continues in the art. I, in my spare time, make art when I can hide myself away. I am working on more projects in the city of Baltimore, which is in a state of major catharsis, but please don't believe the media because they did a rat's ass job of telling you what really happened in Baltimore. The city rose up, the students rose up, the students came forward and addressed the food deserts. The Baltimore Symphony came out on the streets and played concerts the next day to let the city know that we were not going to stand for this, that this was not the way that we wanted to live as people and citizens. And there are enormous projects that are going to be coming through in terms of incubators and changes that are coming out of the creative community. We are creating creative entrepreneurial projects to create jobs and create lives that will sustain people in ways that this will not happen, and we hope that other cities will be able to come and model themselves. We don't think that we're any different from any other city. We know that this has been happening all over the country, but now it's time to have this conversation about race and culture, because the disparities between income, between education, between everything that makes for a decent quality of life have gone on for too long. So I thank you so much. If you have any questions, please feel free. Thank you. Any questions? We can take one or two.
I have a question. I see that a lot of the artwork was kind of based on like tragedies and whatnot. How do you feel about the shootings going on with the police and a lot of racial stuff? Is that like brought any ideas of any new artwork or?
I'm not going to deal with dead bodies. I deal with spirits. I deal with the energy that comes from that. I will probably create a homage. My work, yes, this all has to do with the tragedies of history. All right? But when we were asked to do this piece, this was an exhibition, a 3-part exhibition over a 4-year period at the New York Historical Society. And most of the artists were dealing with a lot of the negative, ugly stuff, all right? And Jose and I wanted to deal with something that talked about a positive thing that happened in history. And it was unfairly decimated for all the wrong reasons, but we wanted to celebrate and illuminate this. And people got it. They got it. They were awed because the New York Historical Society itself was literally 4 blocks away from where this village existed. So yes, that's the nature of life. You have to deal with the living and the dead. It's the yin and the yang. Only I choose to celebrate the positive stuff. After I lived with that image of Emmett Till in my life, you understand? I had to figure out a way to flip the script. Okay? So now I'm ready to deal with, I'll do something beautiful for Emmett Till. All right? I will make something, in my essence, wonderful to celebrate that memory. And really, I am going to be celebrating his mother, who had the courage, who had the temerity to say, take my son's picture and put it out for the world to see. That's who I'm going to celebrate. Not just the loss of her son, but her willingness to share the pain that she had. So it'll come. I don't know how it comes. All of a sudden, I wake up and I go, gotta do it. I even had Jose sewing. I had to go to a meeting and we had to get the piece done, and he called me. I had to burn needles to bend them so that I could finish sewing, and he's a keeper. Any other questions? Is it on?
Can you hear me?
Sure.
Wow, so I probably don't need to. I'm trying to be all cute.
Stand up and project.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for coming to Portland. You are like water on desert. I mean, thank you so much.
Oh, come on, there's more than that here in Portland. They brought me here.
I know. But I'm saying
Yeah.
that I'm still discovering Portland. I actually I was raised in the Bronx. I'm an originally New York person, so I'm like, oh my God. So I'm still discovering Portland, but I appreciate it because there's different things here. So thank you. I'm glad to hear. And thank you for bringing her, all of you. So not to just go, hello. So my question to you is, I noticed throughout your presentation, you always mention, just to figure out what you were saying, there's a spiritual undertone. There's definitely a spiritual, and so I'm just wondering, the question that came to my mind was, how has your journey in the arts contributed to, you know, your understanding of spirituality?
I talked also too about, well, yeah, I talked also, I'm sure I said several times how disconcerting it was for my family to be in the arts. But the one thing that my family would always say, and especially my mother, she would say, you're the spiritual child. She said, you were always the spiritual child. As a child, I don't know why, but I always had an affinity for humble things. I mean, I would see a bone. You know, my mother made a great lamb stew, curried lamb, okay? And I found a bone one day and it just talked to me. And it's my turn to wash the dishes, and I'm washing the dishes, and afterwards I'm washing this bone. And then the next day I go downstairs in my father's toolbox and I get a sandpaper and I start polishing the bone. And my father looks at me and he goes, you really like that bone, don't you? It's a special bone. There's something about this bone, the shape, the form, I really like it. He said, would you like me to put a hole in the bone? Yes, he took a drill and he drilled a hole in the bone. And then I got a piece of cord from my grandmother's sewing box and I put it in. I wore the bone. And then I was wearing the bone and they had just come out with nail polish that was like pearlized. So I took pearlized nail polish and I put it on the bone. I think when I wasn't looking, my mother threw the bone away. My grandmother took me to a powwow once, and I was looking at all of the beaded works, you know. I said, oh, and she said, well, pick out something. I'll buy you a necklace. I'll buy you this. I said, no, buy me the loom. I'll make it. I want to learn how to make it. She bought me the loom, all right? My mother was very upset that, you're going to love this, was very upset that she couldn't dissuade me from having this penchant for the arts and for this affinity for just collecting ephemera. So when I was a Girl Scout, she called up the Museum of Natural History in New York, and she got somebody on the phone in the geology department, and she said, look, I have this child, and she's a Girl Scout, and you know how they have to do badges, okay? So do you have something there that she could do to do these badges? And they said yes, and they said, now, she will think she wants to be an archaeologist, but I don't want you to encourage her, okay? And I don't want you to pay her, all right? Just give her a job and keep her busy and let her get this badge done. Well, for 3 years, I worked at the Museum of Natural History, and I would go in and I would sort the samples that came in from all over the world in all the drawers. And when I was finished sorting the samples, they'd say, oh, you can take the rest home. My mother died. She just threw her hands up. She said, I can't win. I have always been interested in every religion. I was raised a Christian. I am not a Christian. I don't practice. I became interested in every religion and how people acknowledge their spiritual needs. So I'll do Buddhist, I will do Islam, I'll do anything in order to understand how it is that people do that mantra. My husband and I have been doing beads, And beads are nothing but prayers. The original meaning of bead was that it was prayer. All right? That was in its prehistoric times. That's what it was about. And so that's where I get my jism from. You know, that's what juices me up, you know? I will just, you know, and I'll be very quiet. I will go in a place and just sit there, and I like to feel stuff, you know, and people know. They know, just leave her alone, you know, and then I come out and I'll tell my students. Now here's an interesting thing. One year we did a survey at Maryland Institute of our students, and we asked them, what's missing in your curriculum? What would you like to see happen? Do you know what the number one thing was? We want more input on spirituality. We need to know how to navigate and channel this space that we go, you know, when they go in this doing, you know, when you're in the arts, you go into that zone, that space. You know, it's the same kind of zone for an athlete, all right? You go into a special place. What is that about? And the students clearly said that was one of the largest responses we ever had. We did a panel one night on spirituality. We had a little room that could hold 75 people. Before we even started, 15 minutes before, students were lined up in the hall. We moved to a new location. We had over 300 students who stayed for 4 hours to talk about spirituality. I had a Native American faculty member, Korean, and myself. And we sat and we talked. We don't talk about it. We need to talk about it because religion has not been able to keep up with the needs of a 21st century, much less a 20th century reality. And people need to know where the core of their meaning is. We have lost our moral compass. You know, Baltimore is at that juncture, just like every other city that is facing these urban issues that are systemic, they're long-term. We were not surprised in Baltimore that this happened. The people who were living there, this was not a revelation to us. We had been watching this. The public defender's office was screaming about this for decades. And when you look at the cities that pay out because of police brutality, they're paying out millions of dollars, not hundreds of thousands, not tens of thousands, millions. We've lost our moral compass. We don't acknowledge the necessity to have a spiritual site of designation, a safe, sacred space, and that's where I'm comfortable. That's why I don't need to exit. I don't, you know, I can exhibit if you really want me to, but that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I'm trying to understand the mechanism, the process. My library is full of all kinds of books that talk about how people get into their spiritual space. Yeah, you can come one day. She had that look. She's like, oh, I want to see.
Share one day.
Yeah, one day.
Can you share a name of a book? Because that was my next question.
You give me your address and email, and I'll send you some books. I'll send you some names, and if I have any extras, I'll send them to you. And one more. There's it.
It's mainly a statement of appreciation of what you're doing because I feel like as Indigenous people, as underrepresented cultures, that this is what's wonderful right here is the start of a beginning of healing for historical trauma. And when you're talking about spirituality, it's about the ability as our ancestors being present with us and your ancestors being present, and that we all do the healing when we do work like this. And I just want to applaud you and thank you because you're progressing, and it's you're an instrument in your ancestors' hands in doing that healing for all of us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me say this, and this will be the last part for this evening, and then we can continue it in the reception or whatever. I am blessed because the person who brought me here was Sean Quick to see Smith. Sean Quick to see Smith, as well as Edgar Heap of Birds, are two of the individuals who, within my academic scholarly circle, constantly we keep each other informed, and we are hypersensitive to the need to respond to our ancestors. So whenever I'm doing something, I'm standing on the shoulders of my ancestors and all the ancestors of this land, of all the people who came before us. That comes before anything for me. That's why I'm not really compelled to want to look for another exhibition or whatever. I am obsessed with doing the work, of being in the space where, as I said last night, if I can get the door open and push somebody through who, whether they think they're ready or not for that opportunity or whatever, then I'm going to do that, because that's what the ancestors are directing me to do, and that's how I respond. So this is the work that needs to be done, and the students that I work with at the Maryland Institute, they know that when these come about, I am the first one they come to. As well as we have another Native American on our faculty, Jean Peacock, and we have Mina Chung, who deals with Korean shamanism. And so we three, along with other faculty, are hypersensitive to the need to acknowledge our ancestors and those elements in the world. And those are the students who stood up when we had the so-called riots in Baltimore. They were fearless. They stepped right out into the community, and the next morning they were cleaning up with the neighbors in that community and cussing CNN out at the same time. Thank you all so much. I really am humbled to be here. Thank you. Thank you.